Venezuela's interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, has declared that she's had enough of orders from Washington and enough of foreign powers. Addressing oil workers in the coastal city of Puerto La Cruz, she said Venezuelans had to resolve their differences and internal conflicts, and that the country had to face the consequences of fascism and extremism, but did not elaborate. Pressure from Washington appears to be one factor behind the release on Sunday of more than 100 detainees, described by a local human rights group as political prisoners. Correspondents say Ms. Rodriguez has been walking a tightrope since being backed by the US to lead Venezuela in the interim, balancing keeping Maduro loyalists on board at home whilst trying to ensure the White House is happy. Well, for more on this, I'm joined now on the line from London by the author and international affairs analyst, Dr. Marek Laskiwicz. Good to see you, Dr. Laskiwicz. We'll come to other topics in a minute, but let's begin with Venezuela, where the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, says she's had enough of orders from Washington and called on the US to stop interfering in Venezuelan affairs. What do you make of her comments?
It's interesting, isn't it? The Venezuela is largely regarded as suddenly a province of USA, and now we have a sort of rebellion in effect. The question is, what will Donald Trump do about this? Does he want to do anything about this? A key problem for Donald Trump is that the oil companies aren't very keen on going into Venezuela because the oil isn't as easy to process as other oils. And so it's quite possible that Venezuela will not actually be pursued anymore by Donald Trump. He's removed Maduro, he's shown his power, perhaps that suffices. It's all up in the air now. Let's see what's going to happen.
Well, I mean, you certainly sound like you don't expect some kind of sanction from Washington as a result of this apparent defiance from Ms. Rodriguez.
Yeah, the point is, it depends what he has in mind for Venezuela, and this isn't exactly obvious because of the oil companies' point of view. If the oil companies show an interest in going in, then I think he would do something about this minor rebellion. If, on the other hand, they don't, he might well just simply turn his attention elsewhere. He's bored of peace for Gaza. He's currently, of course, doing the Ukrainian war and negotiations. It's entirely possible he may simply not do anything for some time because his attention will be elsewhere. What is quite clear is that his initial plan isn't working out, didn't pan out in a sense, in the way he wanted.
Well, let's leave that for the moment, and might I ask you to stay with us, Dr. Laskiwicz? Would like to get your assessment of this story. Ukraine and Russia have agreed to hold a second round of US-brokered direct peace talks next weekend after a two-day meeting in Abu Dhabi, despite Ukrainian complaints that negotiations were undermined by a barrage of deadly strikes. The trilateral talks in the UAE are scheduled to resume on the 1st of February. Statements after the conclusion of the first round did not indicate that any agreements had been reached, but Moscow and Kyiv both said they were open to further dialogue. The discussions were the first known direct contact between Ukrainian and Russian officials on a plan being pushed by President Trump to end the nearly 4-year war. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said a lot was discussed and that the conversations were constructive. Russia was criticized for launching drone and missile attacks on Kyiv and Kharkiv, Ukraine's two largest cities, during the talks. And Dr. Laskiwicz is still with me on the line from London. So no deal and no breakthrough, but both sides saying they were open to further dialogue. And new talks have been scheduled for February the 1st. How do you assess things?
Well, to be honest, it's no more than I expected because they are absolutely diametrically opposed on the territorial issue, for starters. Over these coming few days, it will be quite clear, as it has already transpired, that Zelensky cannot agree to any territorial concessions, if only because the Poles in Ukraine have shown that they are opposed to this. On the other hand, President Putin cannot lose. He cannot, by any means, have an unsuccessful war. He's a dictator. Dictators don't survive in power if they fail. And so on this one sticky issue, because the Americans see this as the last issue to be dealt with, the whole thing's most likely probably fail. But it cannot fail in an obvious way, and no one wants to be blamed for the failure, because you never know which way Donald Trump will actually then move. So it follows that Russia and Ukraine have had this talk because neither of them felt up to telling President Donald Trump they weren't interested. And therefore, they had them. We can have another talk in, as you say, next weekend, not this one, but not the coming weekend, the one afterwards. And doubtless there will be talks after that. And until one of them makes the mistake that Donald Trump thinks he had not pursuing peace, then these talks can continue for some time. Everyone's happy in that respect because the Americans are happy they've got this trilateral talks, which is a success. They're happy that some issues were apparently resolved, though it's hard to see exactly which ones. And therefore, carry on talking is the order of the day.
Well, I mean, it seems like the central focus of this first discussion was the possible parameters for ending the war, according to a tweet from President Zelensky. And an unnamed official was quoted by the Reuters news agency as saying that they got to real granular detail and they feel that next Sunday's meeting will push the deal towards its final culmination. But your sense is that that's perhaps a little too optimistic.
Indeed, because you see, one of the points about President Zelensky is he does talk up his side, which is perfectly understandable. He's been saying for some time that he can see, if you like, a peace treaty. But the fact of the matter is that nothing's moved for nearly 4 years, and that Russia is carrying on attacking. This is a key point. Russia's winning. It's grinding its way forward. Not the first time in Russian history, incidentally, that this has happened. And the entourage around President Putin is well aware of that and has actually stated this, that how long can, they've asked the question, how long can Ukraine carry on fighting? Because that's a key point. And the point about it is that by scheduling it in 1.5 weeks, long enough for the Russians to carry on fighting, but not too long so as to annoy President Donald Trump. And apparently, by talking to President Zelensky, making him quite happy too. And so therefore, it's a nice situation for Russia to be in. But as for them actually agreeing something, hard to see, isn't it? It's not clear. They still appear to be diametrically opposed on a whole series of issues. And there's no ceasefire. The recent drone bombardment shows that. So the answer is no, I don't think that a sense of optimism should be shared with President Zelensky.
On that note, I want to thank you, as always. Dr. Marek Laskiwicz is the author and international affairs analyst. He was talking to me on the line from London.